I used to believe that love was supposed to be loud, constant messages, late-night calls, hands finding each other without asking. With Ryan Carter, love had become quiet. Not peaceful quiet, but the kind that settles when two people stop checking if the other is still listening. We had been together nearly 2 years, long enough for routines to replace questions. He cared, I knew that. He just didn't see me anymore. I noticed it most in the pauses. The way my words sometimes landed without response. The way he nodded while scrolling his phone. I told myself this was what stability looked like, that wanting more was selfish. Still, some nights, I lay awake wondering when I had started feeling alone next to someone who promised forever. Lucas Reed was never quiet. We had met in college during our first year, bonded by accident more than design. He was confident in a way that made people orbit him without effort. Lucas laughed easily, spoke directly, and never seemed to question where he belonged. He was straight, clearly, consistently, and publicly. Girlfriends came and went until Emily Harris stayed. She was kind, thoughtful, and very much in love with him. I had accepted my place beside Lucas long ago, the gay best friend, the safe one. It was a role I wore comfortably. There were no expectations there, no confusion. At least, that's what I told myself. On a humid Saturday afternoon, Lucas texted me out of nowhere. "Pool's empty. Everyone's out. You should come over." I stared at the screen longer than necessary. Swimming wasn't unusual for us. We had gone before, usually with friends, noise, and music blaring from someone's speaker. This invitation felt different, stripped of distraction. Just us. I hesitated, thinking of Ryan, who was working a double shift and wouldn't be home until late. I typed a response, erased it, then typed again. "Yeah, I'll come by." Lucas lived in a modern apartment complex on the edge of town, the kind with clean lines and rules posted everywhere. When I arrived, the sun was beginning to lower, casting long reflections across the still water. The pool was exactly as he said, empty, silent, untouched. Lucas was already there, sitting on the edge, feet in the water. He looked relaxed, more at ease than I'd seen him in weeks. When he noticed me, his face lit up in a way that felt too personal to analyze. "You actually came," he said, smiling. "I said I would," I replied, trying to sound casual. We talked as we changed, the conversation light and familiar. Work complaints, random jokes, nothing meaningful, and yet everything felt unusually deliberate, as if we were circling something neither of us wanted to name. As we slipped into the pool, the water erased the heat from my skin but sharpened my awareness. The quiet wrapped around us. No music, no voices, just water shifting when one of us moved. Lucas leaned against the pool wall beside me, closer than necessary, though not touching. He stared at the sky for a moment before speaking. "Do you ever feel like you're living the version of yourself everyone expects?" he asked. The question caught me off guard. Lucas wasn't one for abstract thoughts. He was action, certainty. I looked at him, searching his expression. "Sometimes," I said carefully. He nodded, as if that answer mattered more than I realized. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't awkward, it was heavy, full. I should have said something normal. Made a joke. Changed the subject. Instead, I stayed quiet, listening to my heartbeat echo louder than the water around us. Standing there, with the sun dipping low and the world narrowed to this pool, I felt the first undeniable shift. Something was forming, fragile, dangerous, and already too close. I told myself it was nothing. But even then, a part of me knew that once lines begin to blur, they rarely return to where they started. The longer we stayed in the water, the more the outside world seemed to dissolve. The pool lights flickered on as the sun slipped behind the buildings, casting pale reflections across Lucas Reed's face. He looked different in that light, less guarded, less certain. I realized I was studying him, noticing details I had trained myself to ignore. "You're quiet," Lucas said, glancing at me. "So are you," I replied. He smiled at that, a brief curve of his mouth that faded almost immediately. "Just thinking." Lucas wasn't a thinker. He was a doer. The admission unsettled me. We drifted slowly from one end of the pool to the other, neither of us in a hurry. The water muted our movements, softened the space between us. Every time our arms brushed accidentally, a jolt of awareness followed, sharp and unwelcome. I told myself I was imagining it. I told myself this was harmless. Lucas rested his elbows on the edge again, shoulders just above the waterline. Emily's been talking about moving in together, he said casually, but his eyes avoided mine. That sounds serious, I said. Yeah, it is, he exhaled, running a hand through his wet hair. She deserves someone who's sure. I frowned slightly. Are you not? He hesitated. That hesitation felt louder than any confession. I don't know, he said finally. I've never really questioned things before. I just followed the plan. The plan. School, job, girlfriend, future. Lucas Reed fit into it perfectly, at least from the outside. I wondered when the cracks had started forming. I thought of Ryan Carter then, how certain he always sounded when he talked about us, even when his actions suggested distance. Certainty, I was learning, didn't always mean honesty. You ever feel like you're pretending? Lucas asked, his voice lower now. I swallowed, more than I'd like to admit. That made him look at me. Really look. His gaze lingered, searching, as if he was seeing something new in a face he already knew. The air between us tightened. I don't talk to anyone about this, he said. Not Emily. Not anyone. Why me? I asked, though a part of me already knew the answer. Lucas shrugged, but it didn't disguise the vulnerability in his posture. You listen, and you don't expect me to be anything. The words settled heavily in my chest. I had spent so long trying to be easy, to be safe, that I hadn't considered what that role might invite. We swam a few quiet laps, the rhythm steadying my thoughts. When I reached the shallow end again, Lucas was waiting, leaning against the wall. The space between us felt intentional now. Ryan's lucky, Lucas said suddenly. I blinked. What? He has you, Lucas continued. You actually pay attention. You care. The compliment should have warmed me. Instead, it stirred guilt. Fine, I said, though the word felt thin. Lucas studied my face, as if weighing whether to push further. If you ever feel like that changes, he said slowly, you don't have to deal with it alone. Something in his tone crossed an invisible boundary. Not a declaration, not an invitation, just an opening. I should have closed it. I didn't. Neither do you, I replied. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The pool lights hummed softly. The night air cooled my skin where the water no longer touched. I became acutely aware of how close Lucas stood, how easily one step could erase the remaining distance. His hand lifted slightly, then dropped back into the water, sending ripples outward. He laughed under his breath, shaking his head. This is getting weird, isn't it? Only if we make it weird, I said, though my voice lacked conviction. Lucas met my eyes again, something unreadable passing between us. Yeah, he said, only if we do. We climbed out of the pool soon after, wrapping ourselves in towels, both of us quieter than before. As I headed toward my car later, the night felt heavier, charged with things unsaid. I knew, even then, that whatever had shifted between us in that water wasn't going to stay there. It had followed me out, clinging like damp skin, waiting for its next chance to surface. The days after the swim unfolded with an uncomfortable slowness. Nothing dramatic happened, which somehow made everything worse. Lucas Reed didn't text me the way he usually did, no memes, no casual check-ins. When he did reach out, his messages were precise, cautious, as if each word had been inspected before sending. I matched his restraint, though it took effort. At home, Ryan Carter sensed the change before I admitted it to myself. He asked how my week had been, whether I wanted to order food or watch something together. I answered politely, affectionately even, but my thoughts drifted. I hated myself for it. Guilt arrived quietly, settling into corners I didn't know existed. 3 evenings later, Lucas called. Can we talk? He asked. No greeting, no buffer. I hesitated, phone warm in my hand. Now, yeah, he said, if that's okay. I stepped out onto my balcony, the city humming below. What's going on? There was a pause. I could picture him pacing, running a hand through his hair. I keep replaying the other day, he said. And I don't know what to do with it. Neither did I. It was just a conversation, I said, though the words felt dishonest even as I spoke them. Was it? Lucas asked gently, because it didn't feel like one. The truth pressed against my ribs. No, I admitted, it didn't. He exhaled, the sound tight. I don't want to mess anything up. Not with Emily, not with you. I don't either, I said quickly. The list felt incomplete, but I let it stand. We agreed to meet, not at the pool, not anywhere intimate. Just a cafe near campus, public and safe. I arrived early, rehearsing boundaries I promised myself I would keep. Lucas walked in a few minutes later. He looked tired, eyes shadowed, confidence dimmed. When he sat across from me, our knees nearly touched under the small table. I shifted back instinctively. "I've never questioned myself like this," he said without preamble. "Everything used to feel straightforward. And now?" I asked. "Now it feels like I'm standing on a line I didn't know existed." His gaze lifted to mine. "And you're on the other side of it." The admission landed hard. I should have ended the conversation right then. I didn't. "I care about you," I said instead. "But I'm with Ryan. You're with Emily." "I know," Lucas said. "That's the problem." We sat in silence, the cafe noise filling the space we refused to occupy. When Lucas reached across the table, his fingers stopped inches from mine. He didn't touch me. Somehow, that restraint made it worse. "I don't want to lie to her," he said quietly. "But I also don't want to pretend this isn't happening." I thought of Ryan's steady trust, of Emily's unguarded smile. I thought of how easily emotional honesty could become betrayal. "Then maybe we should stop," I said, though my voice wavered. Lucas nodded, but his eyes didn't agree. "Maybe," he echoed. We left separately, as planned. Halfway to my car, my phone buzzed. "I'm sorry," Lucas texted. "I just needed you to know." I stood there longer than necessary, then typed back. "I know." That night, I lay awake replaying every word, every look. Nothing tangible had happened. No line had been crossed in a way that could be explained or confessed. And yet, something irreversible had already taken shape. The next morning, Lucas didn't text. Ryan kissed my forehead before leaving for work, trusting and unaware. The weight of what I carried grew heavier, not lighter. I understood then that infidelity doesn't always announce itself with a single reckless act. Sometimes it arrives quietly, disguised as honesty, and once invited in, it refuses to leave. After the cafe, life resumed its shape, but it no longer fit the way it used to. The days moved forward, ordinary on the surface, yet every interaction carried an aftertaste. Lucas Reed became careful, distant in the way people are when they're afraid of being understood too well. Ryan Carter became kinder, which somehow made everything harder. I caught myself measuring my words around Ryan, choosing neutrality where honesty might raise questions I wasn't ready to answer. He noticed my distraction, of course. He always did, even when he pretended not to. "You've been somewhere else lately," Ryan said one evening as we washed dishes side by side. His tone was gentle, unaccusatory. "I'm just tired," I replied. It wasn't a lie. It just wasn't the whole truth. He nodded, accepting it the way you accept whether you can't change. The trust in that gesture made my chest tighten. I wondered how many small omissions it took to become someone capable of betrayal. Lucas and I didn't meet again. Not intentionally. Our avoidance was mutual, unspoken. When we crossed paths on campus, we exchanged polite smiles, the kind meant for acquaintances, not people who shared a secret they couldn't afford to name. Emily Harris was often with him, her laughter bright and unguarded. Watching them together felt like witnessing a version of reality I had almost disrupted. One afternoon, Lucas finally messaged me. "I think we should give each other space," he wrote. "For everyone's sake." I stared at the words for a long time. They were reasonable, necessary, even. Still, they felt like a loss. "I agree," I replied. That should have been the end of it. In practice, endings rarely arrive so cleanly. The distance gave me room to think, though the answers didn't come easily. I examined my relationship with Ryan more closely, noticing both its comforts and its quiet gaps. I realized how much I had craved being seen, how quickly that need had attached itself to Lucas's attention. It frightened me how natural that shift had felt. One night, Ryan asked a question I'd been expecting. "Are you happy?" he said. The simplicity of it disarmed me. I opened my mouth, closed it, then tried again. "I care about you," I said. He smiled faintly, as if he'd anticipated the deflection. "That's not what I asked." The truth hovered between us, fragile and unfinished. I didn't confess. I couldn't. Instead, I admitted what I could. "I don't want to feel invisible," I said. "I don't want to drift." Ryan reached for my hand, squeezing it gently. "Then don't," he said. "Stay with me. Talk to me." I wanted to believe it was that simple. I wanted to believe intention could erase what had already changed. Weeks passed. Lucas remained distant, respectful of the boundary he'd drawn. Emily stayed unaware, her trust intact. On the surface, no damage had been done. Yet I felt altered, marked by a version of myself I hadn't known existed. Sometimes, late at night, I thought back to the pool, the still water, the quiet, the moment when choice first presented itself without demanding an answer. I understood now that nothing dramatic had happened because we'd stopped ourselves just in time. And yet, stopping hadn't saved us from consequence. Infidelity, I learned, isn't always about what you do. It's about what you allow yourself to imagine. It's about the intimacy you give away before you realize it no longer belongs solely to you. Ryan and I continued, cautiously, rebuilding something that resembled trust. Lucas returned fully to his life, to Emily, to the version of himself that felt safer to inhabit. We never spoke about what had almost happened. We didn't need to. Silence carried enough meaning. Still, there are moments, passing reflections, shared memories, quiet pulls at dusk, when I feel the weight of that near miss settle back into my chest. Not regret exactly, more like awareness. Some lines, once seen, can't be unseen. And some stories don't end with revelation or rupture, but with the quiet knowledge that you came closer to losing everything than anyone will ever know.